I love horror games. I first gained an interest in them through YouTube, where Let's Players and reviewers showcased lesser-known projects from indie developers. In the last few years, indie horror games have developed a reputation for being jump-scare fests, which isn't fair. Horror games take on many different forms, especially in the independent scene. Tormentum Dark Sorrow is a point-and-click horror game released in 2015 by Polish studio Ono. It was the first PC game they ever developed, only having prior experience creating interactive children's books for mobile devices. I don't remember exactly how I discovered Tormentum's existence, but I do remember being drawn to its artwork. Despite having little experience with the point-and-click genre, I put it on my wishlist. I finally purchased it in 2018, played it, and then never touched it again. It's not as if I didn't like it or anything. Far from it, I had a pretty good time, but there was nothing that made me want to return to it until some friends of mine voted for me to cover it. This time around, I want to look at the game from a more critical perspective. Maybe it's a real hidden gem that I'll appreciate even more after a second playthrough. On the other hand, perhaps there's a reason I never touched this game again. Guess we'll find out. Heads up for new viewers. I usually talk about the story first, and I will spoil the ending. So if you want to watch the review spoiler-free, skip to this timestamp. Tormentum starts with an Immanuel Kant quote. This doesn't sound very important, but keep it in mind for later. It'll turn out to be a big problem. Our unnamed protagonist wakes up in a metal cage attached underneath an airship. Meteors rain down from the sky. He lacks memory of who or where he is, and the rodent guy next to him can only explain that their captors take those marked by evil and conduct their operations during meteor storms. Okay, before I proceed, the characters in Tormentum aren't given names, so going forward in this video, if I have to mention somebody important, I'm gonna make up a name for them. So from this point onwards, this guy is Abraham, and this guy is Splinter. When the airship lands, both of them are immediately thrown in prison to be held for execution, but Abraham manages to break out. Funnily enough, after he escapes his cell, nobody in the castle seems particularly concerned with him just wandering around the building. This jester even gives him a knife and tells him to kill a woman in the cage. Okay, man. Or maybe they're assuming Abraham will get himself killed because holy shit, this castle is so needlessly dangerous. These hands right here, they just come out of nowhere to crush anyone who doesn't place these weights in arbitrary positions. That's it, that's their job. How does anyone get around? Throughout the story, there are several moments where Abraham can choose how he wants to solve a problem. The decisions are typically pretty tough ones that encourage the player to put a lot of thought into them before proceeding. Oh wait, no they don't. This is an element of the game's narrative that I've been iffy about ever since I first played it. Having permanent decisions that affect the story sounds interesting until you realize that most of these decisions boil down to having an obviously good and bad option. In one instance, Abraham can choose to either free Splinter from his cage or drop him into a pit of spikes below. That's not a deep or meaningful decision. The game is just asking me if I'm a psychopath or not. I could see this working better if there was a reasonable motivation for Abraham to do the wrong thing. Well, there's one decision that's like this. I'm fast-forwarding a little bit later into the game, but at one point, Abraham enters a blind painter's cathedral. We'll call him Ivan. Abraham needs Ivan's blueprints to create a sword, but Ivan says he'll only do such a thing if Abraham restores a bunch of his paintings. Doing that is long and tedious, but Ivan's pet cat offers a faster solution, cutting open the paintings to copy the blueprints hidden behind them. This works better than most of the other decisions because 1, I'm personally sympathetic to wanting to get the blueprints as fast as possible, and 2, I also have to sit through the boring process of restoring the paintings. I'm sacrificing my time to do the right thing. Another decision that I think is kinda cool involves an object called the Storm Egg. There are 2 people who claim to need it. A tree named Arbor, who needs to stop these crows from pestering him, and a bird called Pitt, who claims that the egg is his property that was stolen from him. After hearing both of their stories, I was sympathetic to both of their situations. So what's the correct choice? Well, when entering this tower on the way to the Storm Egg, Abraham is given the opportunity to read through some books about the world he's found himself in. And one of these books talks about the Grey Ikari, who eat other animals' eggs and are known for their dishonesty. I was rewarded for learning about Tormentum's world by receiving clarity on the conflict. But that's where the interesting decision-making ends. The rest of them boil down to whether or not Abraham wants to press the Be Evil button. It's far from the worst thing ever, but it's a little disappointing that most of the choices require absolutely no thought. After breaking out of prison, Abraham meets I don't really know what this guy is, named Grumble. He came from the village of Frozen Tears, where the meteor storm has signaled that trouble is coming to them. However, the village contains a statue with rising hands that Abraham has been seeing visions of ever since he woke up in this world. Grumble warns Abraham that many in Frozen Tears have already gone insane, though that doesn't really mean much considering the fact that almost every single person Abraham has met so far has been at least a little bit nutty. Regardless, Abraham makes his way to Frozen Tears after assisting this conductor in repairing his train. Now would be a good time to point out that Tormentum has a great understanding of how to build tension. One of my favorite examples is this set of letters in the mines, where the miners who were here before Abraham gradually realized that their drilling for crystals was leading to the unintended consequence of waking up long-dormant creatures, but they were forced to continue their job under threat of execution from their castle. It all builds up to Abraham having a pretty intense encounter with one of the monsters, which he then has to find a way to kill. After arriving in the war-torn village of Frozen Tears, Abraham finally finds the statue he has seen so many times in his visions, only to discover that it requires a sword forged out of star metal to even activate. However, with the help of Ivan and John, a blacksmith, this proves to be a surmountable obstacle. Abraham again walks up to the statue and plunges the sword deep inside it, opening a portal to the most otherworldly location he's seen yet. He makes his way deep underground until he finally reaches a large chamber at the bottom of an elevator, where he meets a massive entity called Evelyn, who reveals the truth of this world. Abraham is already dead. When he was alive, he murdered his wife out of jealousy and killed himself immediately after. The world he's been traveling around is a purgatory of sorts, where Evelyn could judge him to determine whether or not he was worthy of going to heaven. Depending on the decisions Abraham has made to this point, one of two endings will play out. If he's made enough good decisions, Abraham is sent to heaven to potentially reunite with his wife. A beautiful soft rock song plays in the background as Abraham ascends upward.
I won't ever let you slip away from my head. It's like I'm in a dream when I'm away. Calling your name, and I'll keep reaching, holding on. 'Cause I won't ever let you slip away from my head.
If he's made too many bad decisions, however, then Abraham is sent barreling down to hell, accompanied by heavy metal music. My problem with both of these endings is how they tie into that quote from the beginning. This is the second part of Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, which is a fancy way of saying moral system.
Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never merely as a means to an end, but always at the same time as an end.
Kant is trying to say that people should be treated as people rather than as steps towards a greater goal. For example, if I'm going to strike up a friendship with Conrad, it should be because I want a friendship with Conrad, not because he has connections to Hollywood executives that could land me a major role in a big movie. Unfortunately for the narrative, that's ultimately how the characters Abraham meets are treated by Evelyn. Did Splinter want to be part of her experiment to test Abraham? What about Ivan? What about this guy or this guy? Abraham treats them as a means to her end goal of determining whether or not Abraham is worthy of being sent to heaven, knowing full well that Abraham might do absolutely reprehensible stuff to them. But the game never portrays her as being in the wrong for this. By allowing this quote to be what sets the tone of the game, the ending missed the mark pretty badly. I acknowledge that for many people this isn't going to be a fatal flaw, since Tormentum is primarily selling itself on its visual flair, but it bothered me enough to want to point it out. I played snippets of Tormentum's music earlier in the video, but the rest of the soundtrack is nothing like that. It's mostly haunting, ambient pieces, such as the following. I'll admit that I wouldn't be able to recall most of them while scripting this segment, but I still found them nice to listen to during my playthrough. The music backs up some truly stellar visuals. Lead artist Piotr Ruszkowski took inspiration from the works of H.R. Giger and Zdzisław Beksiński. It's clear that a lot of effort went into it. Almost every screen could have been used as a cover for a heavy metal album. One of the most impressive parts of the game occurred during the section at the Painter's Cathedral. They could have put some scribbles inside of the painting frame and called it a day, but no. Every single painting can be zoomed in on to reveal highly detailed artwork. That's dedication, and it paid off. Tormentum's gameplay is, well, exactly what you'd expect from a point-and-click game. You point at things and you click on them. Objects can be found scattered around the game's numerous screens that are held in the protagonist's satchel for later use in puzzles. This bird's nest can be used to start a fire, for example. Most of the puzzles are pretty brain-dead, though. Wow, this toy statue goes with these other toy statues? Oh my god, this mirror piece goes on the empty mirror frame? These wheels? Go in the minecart that has no wheels? It's far from Galaxy Brain stuff, and that's me ignoring all of the times when a character straight up told me what to do with an item. The biggest challenge for me was finding objects, not figuring out what to do with them. A lot of them are decently well hidden, and I had fun searching for them. Alongside the satchel is the notepad, which is used to jot down important stuff for convenience. I appreciate its presence. It prevents me from having to get out my phone to capture the same information. I don't play enough point-and-click games to know if something like this is standard for the genre, but if it's not, it should be. Occasionally, the game likes to mix things up by presenting these smaller, more isolated puzzles. These had a lot of variation, and their inclusion is also appreciated. These were a nice change of pace from Tormentum's general gameplay loop of collecting and using objects. Even these sliding puzzles, which I would ordinarily hate, weren't too bad. However, these puzzles too were pretty easy for the most part, so if you were expecting a challenge from them, you'll again be disappointed. As someone who doesn't mind easy puzzles though, I'm not bugged by this personally. So, should you purchase Tormentum Dark Sorrow? I'd argue it depends on what you want out of it. When comparing the game to similar titles I've played, it's significantly weaker in the story department, and when taking into consideration its minimal gameplay, that's a pretty big mark against it. However, its art direction and atmosphere is top-notch, and if that's the big draw for you, then I'd say it's worth picking up just for that. I think a lot of the problems that Tormentum suffers from are a result of first game syndrome. In 2018, Ono Studio released their second game, Chalk, to crazy positive reception. I haven't played it myself, but it looks good. A sequel to Tormentum was announced in that same year, but little of it has been shown in the time since. At least as late as a year ago, the developers have confirmed that work on Tormentum 2 continues, and given that the devs seem to be improving at game development, I have no doubt it'll be a vast step up from the original. I look forward to it.